If you want to support my side channel endeavours, where I make these wonderful videos about things I'm interested in other than esports, maybe consider buying something from the GamerSupps website. You can get 10% off everything there using the code Thorin, Thorin. How about some delicious strawberry lemonade GamerSupps? Maybe try the AFK blend to help you go to sleep. Maybe you'd like some gamer tees or some apparel like this shirt here, the Mile High Club one. Check it all out, get 10% off. Right, Boards of Canada are an electronica slash intelligent dance music. It depends what era you're coming in and describing this as. Some people would probably, sadly, Americans probably even go techno or some shit, even though it's not even vaguely like that. They are, to me, one of the greatest groups in the history of music. Like, I don't use Spotify and those sorts of like programs that track how many times you played a track, but put it this way, in the time I've had a computer and played music on the computer, Boards of Canada would easily be number one for most played artist slash group ever for me. And I've been on the internet doing that sort of thing for like 20 to 30 years at this point in time. So they would be ahead of all my other favourites, like all the drum and bass, Black Sun Empire. I mean, even other electronic, Aphex Twin. They'd be ahead of fucking King Crimson in prog rock, or Rush, or who else? Fucking Led Zeppelin in rock, or Noel Gallagher's work, Oasis, Burial in future garage. You go down you pick any single genre, this would be number one for me. And so I thought perfect group to do a tier list about. Now, if you don't know, I won't do a massive intro on this, but Boards of Canada is basically two brothers. It actually wasn't even known they were brothers for many years, by the way, because they intentionally, I assume one used like his mother's maiden name. They intentionally had different names initially. There was two Scottish guys who release electronic music, if you know Warp Records, in the style of the early pioneers of that type of music, Autechre, Aphex Twin, Square Pusher, Music, as in the mu sign Zik, all those people that everyone remembers in the early days played, etc. And they're one of the original pioneer groups like that from Warp. And crucially for me, they're a really interesting group because of kind of the ethos of the group. Like, basically, they've got some kind of like a hippie libertarian vibe to them, where they really are guys that just live out in like the wilds of Scotland. They don't do live shows, by the way. I think they've only played live something like 3 times. And by the way, the last time was something like 23 years ago or something. It was like in the early 2000s. And they're not people who release a lot of material even. They haven't released that many albums. I mean, the last album, by the way, was in 2013. But they are a group where, because they have this mystique and this mysterious element, where they're not a group that seems to like to do interviews. They're not a group that tries to play live. They're not a set of people trying to make a lot of money from their art, seemingly. Well, first of all, that already makes them intriguing, doesn't it? It makes, what's going on with it? Oh, that's a bit unusual. Then also, they've got this factor that they've still done loads of music. Like, for example, because they've got this crazy niche cult following, they've done loads of remixes of some really amazing shit. I'm not going to talk about it in this episode, because this episode is going to be about their work, but they are also one of the best remixing groups probably ever. They've done some unbelievable. Check out the Beck Broken Drum remix, or the Y remix. Just look it up. Somewhat the Bobba Tom one, the Last Walk Around whatever lake. Like, there's some unbelievable remixes. So they are just a fabulously talented group, and they've got this weird thing where, first of all, there was even like a different person, this guy who later on the alias Christ, who was like within their group early on, because they're also part of some sort of a weird art collective called like Hexagon Sun Collective or whatever, which in theory isn't just them. It's like them plus maybe some like other artists that live in their area, and you get the vibe. If people don't know, this doesn't sort of exist anymore, unfortunately, but there used to be a thing in the 80s and 90s in the UK called art labs, where they'd be almost like an after-school club, but instead of being like just for like, delinquent boys to give them something to do and a sort of father figure, instead it would be for like people who just wanted to be artists, people who wanted to be painters, sculptors, and you'd go along to these like community centre areas, and they'd have set times where you could just go in and basically use their materials or get like advice and tips from other local artists and people. And maybe a poet would come down and do a reading. If you don't know, that's where people literally like Alan Moore came from in the UK, other artists. So they almost have that kind of a vibe to what they're doing in Scotland, and they're famously very reclusive. They mainly only do text interviews. You've almost never seen them in video. Like I said, they don't play out live. They're actually, put it this way, the difference is someone like Daft Punk intentionally curated Mystique, but as a marketing tool and did enormous concerts where they made a fuck ton of money. Boards of Canada has never been like that. I won't say Daft Punk are sellouts in that sense, but Boards of Canada have not courted commercial success like that. Interesting detail, because they're such a niche, and if you like them, cult following group, they are also people where if you've never heard their music, knowingly, I guarantee you have if you are from the UK. Because the BBC, but loads, quite frankly, of documentary filmmakers in the UK have people who obviously love this type of music and use this music all the time in the background of documentaries. It's just they won't be saying this is by Boards of Canada and you won't know it, and you'll just hear some interesting sort of music. A detail to say about their music is they are simultaneously people who use like computerized digital elements like beats, etc., all are clearly constructed in the computer. But they also began as people actually using, jangly guitars and real drums, etc., and very simple. And crucially, a detail about their music is it has this really incredible nostalgic effect, even when the music itself is neither actually music that was created years ago, nor necessarily even a famous type from them. What they do is they use effects like tape decay or putting in like weird like crackles and things like that. If the artist Burial, he does a similar thing. They intentionally make their music sound almost like found artifact, found footage, but music or something, as if this is actually, you're rummaging around in your attic and your old uncle was a musician's thing when he dies, and you find a bunch of cassettes and you put them in and you start playing, and suddenly there's all this fucking cool ass like unique music blending like digital elements with like classic folk aspects with trippy sort of trance or like ambient components also within their music. I would say their music has a sort of, put it this way, I'm quite sure they've done quite a decent amount of psychedelic mushrooms, I'd say at a minimum, if not LSD and plenty of other drugs like that as well, almost certainly weed smokers, because they certainly have a quality to their music, which is the kind of like spiritual dimension people who use those drugs, not just purely in theory for entertainment, would try and wax lyrical about the idea, you can, what the soul reaches for, or what like memory itself is within humans, imagining past lives. These things all tie into the ambience of this group. So crucially, it's a group I've listened to all of this a bazillion times over, hence why I feel quite comfortable making a tier maker list. So this was someone else already made. They've got 13 at, let me see, 3, 6, 9, 12. Wait, there's a 14? 3, 6, 9, 12. No, 14. There's 14. We're going to say albums, they're going to say, but it's actually albums, EPs, and some of them are actually even unreleased. Here's an interesting detail. This group is so reclusive and actually has such a sort of sparse amount of actual main releases, like full albums and EPs. They've done all the remixes, like I say, that also people obsessively search out any music they have online. And supposedly as part of this art collective early on, before they were famous, they used to actually just give out cassettes to their friends of the music they were working on. Some of those cassettes are listed online, like what is it, Acid Memories and stuff. They just don't exist. No one's ever heard them. There's never been a real leak. There's been like the odd like 20-second clip that people claimed was, but it's also famous, like back in the day, how on Napster, etc., people would take songs and rename them to different artists that sounded vaguely similar and pretend it was like a new Nine Inch Nails track. Similarly, people have also spoofed so many tracks by Orteka and Played and other people like that to pretend they were new or that old Boards of Canada material. But I will cover all of this. I've listened to every single album and piece of music here many, many, many times over. So what we'll do is we'll just go in order. It looks like No, there's not a set order, actually. I was going to say, what order have they gone in here? So basically, and also I'll show you them as I do it. So this first one here is going to be an EP. This is the In a Beautiful Place in the Country. Is that what it's called? Out in the Country. There you go. This is an EP they did in 2000. Right, it only has 4 tracks, but I'll tell you what, it is a very strong EP. This is a really good EP. Like, first things first, I'm already thinking, remember, I'm really harsh with the S tier, but I'm already thinking it's probably going to get A tier. And the reason why is quite simple. Because, first of all, none of these tracks feature on their main other albums, etc. So there's not a lot of crossover, which sometimes there is, as you'll find out as we go through this. But more importantly, These two tracks, Kid for Today, would be a contender for my favourite track and most played track by BoC Maxima. It's absolutely phenomenal. Has a really interesting, like, hypnotic, I don't know if it's a snare drum routine behind it. Just a really great, like, rhythmic track. In a Beautiful Place Out in the Country, the title track is also one of their best tracks. It's a very, very strong. So these two are two of their better tracks that they've done. So that already gives you a very strong EP. Then the other two, I would say, are ones that grow on you. They're more sort of like droning, sort of simplistic tracks, but I think they both actually have quite a catchy aspect that over time, pretty sweet, eventually you'll never skip a track on this. It's only 4 tracks, but even then, by the way, we're talking, what, like 23 minutes or something? So it's still a decent size, like half an album or so. I think I'm going to put that straight into here. Now, look, I can obviously recontextualize later, but that's going to go here for now. It's a very strong release. It's not going to be as good as their albums with loads of material, but it's going to be better than probably some of the like unreleased stuff, etc., and some of the more middling stuff, or some of the stuff that maybe even has crossover appeal. Crossover with other albums, rather. Then you've got Geogaddi. This was their second proper album after Music Has the Right to Children. It came out in 2002. You can see they don't sell tons of albums, by the way. They're a very niche band group in that respect. This is one of their strongest albums ever. Spoiler, their actual full albums, I think I'll probably just put them all in S tier. They're all really strong. If we're talking about the real mainstream Warp albums they released, they're phenomenal. One of the other things about BoC Maxima is, as well as this like interesting electronic style, they are notorious for having loads of like 1 minute to 2 minute tracks that are filler, but they're not. They're filler in the sense that they're not skits or silly things like in a rap album. They're more like aspects. I mean, I even think some of the stuff that Tool put in their albums is a bit too filler, quite frankly. And that last album, some of that on the LP was ridiculous, the filler. These are more like little vignettes or little rhythms that actually sometimes are reprised in the next track or sort of lead into it, or even things they worked on in their unreleased material that they've now curated into a little artifact and they put it on there. So you get a bunch of real full tracks, but also these smaller ones, and it all builds together. And I find their albums are excellent at not needing to be skipped. You can just go from beginning to end and it's a fucking journey, man. So Geogaddi, definitely one of their best ones. If someone says this is their best album, I won't argue with you. I think it's up there. I'd probably go Music Has the Right to Children, more so than the latter two, but I tell you what, this is an extremely good album too. So I think that's going to go straight into S tier for me. Again, there's some great tracks on this one. Music is Math is an excellent one. This is one of these short vignettes I'm talking about. Dandelion is fucking one of the most hypnotic, addictive, small tracks they ever made. I could listen to that and repeat a million times. What else have we got? 1969, one of their all-time great tracks for me. 1969 in the Sunshine is the refrain in that one. The Beach at Red Point is one that'll grow on you. That was probably one of my favourite tracks they ever did. Amazing sort of droning track. It's really special. Corsair is the one that sounds like you're on a plane. I've even done that thing where you get like the homework editor that's like 50 minutes to actually listen to on planes and just chill out. It's really sort of droning ambient aspect that's fucking beautiful, really evocative, can really take you somewhere in your mind. This title track, which was technically a Japanese bonus track, you must download this. This is a track where they take a bunch of little kids, I don't know, it's like Sesame Street, it's like praying in different languages from different cultures, but they tie it with this like very sort of emotional music behind it. It's just fucking baller. It's just really, really good. So I'm going to put that instantly S tier. This is another album. This is the Campfire Headphase. Now, I will say this is already where I can get into an interesting detail here. So this was their third album, and it came out in 2005. I can tell you, because it had elements like real-life guitars, and it wasn't as sort of electronic as some of their earlier albums. Like, I would say Music Has the Right to Children is the harshest sort of electronic album, along with Geogaddi. The rest have, like, other elements, and this is more the most folky of theirs. This is more where you get the sense they are these hippies living out in Scotland. And because of that, because of some of the jangly guitars, actually people, as it says here, received generally positive reviews. It actually was kind of panned a bit when it came out. This album and the next one, some people even thought like, oh, these are fakes or decoys they released. A bit like what happened with Tool with 10,000 Days. In fact, I'm going to draw a comparison again to Tool. Because I actually think if you know the history of the music of Tool, Tool fans all worshipped Lateralis so hard and loved Anima that as soon as 10,000 Days came out, a lot of them, I was there, panned it and said it wasn't very good. I even said, oh, the guitars are just copying all the riffs from Lateralis. And then it wasn't until like actually this Latter Day album came out, which initially people didn't vibe with either, the Fear Inoculum, that people were kind of being like, they're a bit washed and they're just copying their own material. I would say now, if you're a fan of Tool and enough years have passed and you've listened to all these albums, don't all of those albums sound like Tool? Don't they all sound awesome and in their own different way because of the different eras? Now, after you've gotten used to it and that's become like part of your fucking palette of Tool, you like them all, don't you? They're all awesome albums. In fact, now you'd think someone's silly if they said 10,000 Days sucks. I think I like 10,000 Days more than fucking Lateralis sometimes. So similarly, I think the latter two albums, especially the Campfire Headphase, got panned early on and people thought it was not really Birds of Canada. Now it just sounds like another amazing chapter in the awesome Birds of Canada story with loads of what are now classic tracks because it's now 20 years later. So certainly, listen, I'm going to do the orders here. This will never be number one, but this almost certainly is going to be S tier as well because I also think this is a really strong album. Like, by the way, always get the bonus tracks as well because they're just such a great group that they'll throw like a fucking one of the better tracks as a bonus track sometimes. I think this one is a fucking banger album too. Like one of my favorite tracks ever is this song Peacocktail. Really fucking special track. Wonderful guitar element to it. Let me think, what else am I going to take here? Oscar See Through Red Eyes, one you'll immediately vibe with if you like Boards of Canada. There's quite a lot of interest in what Davian Cowboy became a single, etc. was really good. Pontiac Dreams, fun. I would say a lot of the latter ones are quite the latter ones are like sitting around a campfire, by the way, quite emotional as well. Stuff like Slow This Bird Down, Tears from the Compound Eye, Farewell. A lot of these are more sort of soulful, mournful, wistful tracks that you would look out through a campfire at night as the sun's gone down and everything's wrapping up and it's just the world gets smaller and you're just thinking about things while listening to music painting on the canvas of the black sky. This is a fucking just a vibe. This album is fucking baller. Right, then we have got, this is the Trans Canada Highway EP. They mean trans as in like transport, etc. This is like some sort of a place in Canada, I assume. By the way, they're not actually from Canada, they're from Scotland. Boards of Canada is some sort of a reference to like the Canadian Film Board, who would make these strange little like nature documentaries and films that had music that was kind of like, I mean, theirs is more digital because they're in the 90s and 2000s, but if you know sort of like Windy and Carlos and stuff like early electronic, almost like Kraftwerk level stuff, where you'd have people who do some sort of like cool keyboard material that had almost electronica foreshadowing in. That's what essentially they were inspired by in their youth. So they often reference Canada, etc. So whereabouts is it? There we go. So the Trans Canada EP was their last EP, came out in 2006, shortly after their last album. Oh no, this would be after Campfire Headphase and before their last album. No, what am I talking? The last album would be like 7 years after this or something. This is another really strong EP, by the way. This group does not fuck around. You will see. Look, I do think High Scores and what's the other one? High Score and Twoism. They are weaker than the In a Beautiful Place Out in the Country and this one, but these are just fabulous EPs. So first of all, Davian Cowboy, to be fair, is a track from Campfire Headphase, so you don't get bonus points for having that. Still a nice track to listen to, though, one of the better ones in the latter day. Left Side Drive, which only appears on this EP, is literally would be a top 10 track for me from Boards of Canada. I think it's fucking unbelievable. Skyline is also an excellent track. These two, by the way, easily could have been on the Campfire Headphase. They're both, this is one of the things about amazing artists. They'll sometimes think a throwaway track is like whatever, and you'll listen to it and be like, that's one of the best things you ever did, but they don't see it that way because they have a different view on their oeuvre, their body of work. So Skyline is also a fantastic track, and if you want a fabulous vignette type smaller track, Under the Cork Sign. It has again, the second you hear it, if you've ever heard it before, you'll instantly recognize it's iconic if you're a Boards of Canada fan. So I've got to say, again, it is an EP, but I'm thinking A. I'm thinking I'm going straight A here. By the way, I will say, credit to Boards of Canada. Their actually properly released stuff is their best stuff generally. But there are gems in some of the older stuff and some of the like stuff that just got leaked as cassettes from friends. And we'll get to that as we go on. So next up is their most recent album. It is Tomorrow's Harvest. Came out in 2013. And as you can see, they were busy in the 90s and then the 2000s. And here's the sad thing. They just only became a remix band around this time, and they've done literally, it's 12 years and we've had no album, and not even word of an album, by the way. Like their subreddit is notorious for you just don't get any info from it, and they don't do interviews, so they don't communicate these things, unfortunately. So When this first came out, I remember some people certainly bounced off it. I already knew I was going to enjoy it because the first single they released was the Reach for Dead one, which already was fucking classic Boards of Canada if you enjoy it. I do think of their albums, if we're talking about the 4 proper released albums, which is this one and Music Has a Right for Children, I do think it's probably the weakest of the 4, because mine would probably go number 1, I think, is Music Have the Right to Children. Number 2, probably Geogaddi. Number 3, probably Campfire. Essentially, I go in order, I guess. I mean, I also did start with the group when they were on the first album, to be fair. It is still really good, though. First of all, I actually think, you notice the vignettes aren't as short. I actually think the vignettes are almost more like half tracks or 3/4 tracks. And some of these sound almost a bit weird, almost like radio transmissions early on, but some of them get quite addictive, I'll say, over time. Reach for Dead itself, by the way, is a fucking fantastic track. Cold Earth, super iconic, even, again, it's so evocative. Like I love the way they name their tracks. It's called Cold Earth, and it has sort of a fucking distance to it when you listen to it. What else am I going to take here? Nothing Is Real is another one that sort of has like elements that blend in, like weird samples. They like to put a lot of weird samples from like cult things or weird TV broadcasts or commercials. This has like a really interesting sample on it. New Seeds is the one that has like, it's almost like their old unreleased stuff, or jangly guitars, but then it goes into an electronica track. And I actually think my favourite track on this album, probably Come to Dust. One of the best boards. It's actually quite a sinister, sort of intimidating track. But very bold, but it's a fucking unbelievably good track too. A real banger. So I think I'm putting this instantly in the S tier. Then we've got an EP. This is the Twoism EP. Is everything on here? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. It's their first EP back in 1995, which would be, let's see. Yeah, this is before they'd even released a single album, because the first album came out in 98. So 95, this would actually be, in theory, their first proper release. Let me just double check something. Where is BoC Maxima? When was that released? 96. Yeah, this would actually be the first thing, in theory, you would commercially have heard from Boards of Canada, as the Twoism EP. Because even the BoC Maxima, which was sort of like, I think, given out to like show off some of the stuff they'd worked on EPs, and eventually some of it went on to Music Has the Right for Children, etc. I think that was like a year later. So this would be the first thing you'd heard of. And it's certainly not their best EP, but it is a fucking good EP. Like, I tell you what, immediately I can go ahead and put this in the A tier. Let me think, is that it? Yes, I think I can go straight in A tier. Here's why. Right, 69er is one of their best tracks. And if you like the album that came after this, it could easily have been on there. It's a really great track. This one, Oirectine, is actually a song, as a random detail. I once had a dream where this song kept playing, and I woke up and I thought, that sounds like Boards of Canada. And I went and listened to all their music, and I found, it's just that track, even though it wasn't one that had stuck with me in some sense. It just has, again, like a David Lynch-esque dream ambience to it. I also love how great they are at ambient music, by the way. They're really, really good. They're mega with beats, but they're phenomenal without. They're quite like Aphex Twin in that sense. I also think, what else is good here? Twoism itself is a really iconic track, one of their best that they've done. We'll always get the hidden tracks, by the way. Just a pretty solid, again, I'm going to say very good. This is excellent. Elite tier. This is very good. This would be what good. This is like decent. And then I'm probably not going to put anything D, because essentially I revere this group. I think almost everything they've done is amazing, pretty much. So then we are going to, what does that say? I think that says A Few Old Tunes. Which one is that? A Few Old Tunes? No, that's not right. Which one is that? Random 35 track tape, maybe? Wait there a second. Let me just check something. I need to check what that actually is. What is that? Yes, that's the... Right, this one here... Notice it's not going to be listed. It's going to be unreleased here. There are 3 unreleased albums they have that could just be albums. It's just their really early material. I mean, look, this is all before their first album. And they are all, if you love Boards of Canada, you enjoyed their mainstream stuff, get into the mainstream stuff first. Then you go and hunt this stuff down, because there are some gems in there. There are some unreleased tracks that are mega. There are also some that are just whatever, and some that actually show some really early like development that isn't even necessarily that good. But there are some really banger tracks out there. So I'm going to have to go to one of their fan pages to show you some of that. So this first one is going to be what was called Random 35 Tracks Tape. And this actually, despite the fact it says here it was released in 1995, this only came out, from what I remember. Look, it says it was only leaked in the early 2000s. Now, interestingly, there's also, though, in the latter years, been someone who released a much better quality version, though, that was like actually like sounded a lot better. So, crucially, most of the tracks don't have actual names. They're just track 1, track 3, track 4. Now, some of them do. Some of them come along here. And yes, some of their tracks, by the way, even a couple of them do come onto their later, like actual real, look, see, like down here, this track maybe later became 6010 from Music Goes Right to Children. This basically is the song that became 7477. This became June 9th. You have a few tracks that eventually became things they used on later material, but not most of it. There's actually a lot of stuff in here. Some of it's a mixed bag. I'll give you that. It is a mixed bag. But I do think there's some really good material in here, though. Like, for example, I'm immediately thinking of Finity, which was also, I think, on like old Volume 2 or whatever the fuck it was called. That's a fucking banger right there. Is there anyone who doesn't enjoy that track if you like Boards of Canada? It's really fucking good. What else? What else? Like, I would say in general, of the unreleased stuff, the three that I just showed you, Random 35 track, a few old tunes, aka Old Volumes Volume 2, and Old Tunes Volume 2, I think this might actually be the best. I think a lot of the smaller pieces are good. It has some really strong big tracks in there. I think that would probably be the best. But you know what? It's not as polished, and there are some fiddle aspects. I'm probably going to put that B, I think. I think B makes the most sense for that one. Certainly check out a track like Finity, although to be fair, it's also on one of the other ones. I think it's also on a few old tunes. I think it's also there as well, to be fair. It's also why I don't give it the toppermost marks. Right, then we have got... Is that high score? No, I think that's high scores. That's not high scores. What is this one then? Obviously, I don't own these in real life, so I don't know the artwork often. What EP is that? Because that one's high scores. So is this... Oh, wait, logically, it must be one of the old tunes ones. Right. Old tunes. So that one's that. Oh, this is going to be... Right, there we go. That's what it is. It's because that face looks different from this. Right, this is the one that I always have listed as a few old tunes, but also some people call it Old Tunes Volume 1. This is another, like the Random Track 35. It's actually one they never intended to release. They don't want it released. It was actually just spread around to friends of theirs, and I'm assuming because it's got some straight fire elements on it, and it's super... like collectible, people have just copied the cassette a million times, digitized it, and it's just gotten out there online. Like, look, it even says here, some of the people they sent it to was like one of the guys from Autechre, the guy who his music and had his own label, etc. Yeah, a whole bunch of that shit. Now, I will say with this one, I do think this one is not as strong overall as the Random 35 track tape, but I tell you what, it's got Finity on as well. It's a really good track. I think this one is one of the best tracks they've ever done. 5978. It's a fucking phenomenal piece of music. It's got a bunch of tracks that end up on things like BoC Maxima later, or Music Has a Right for Children, like Happy Cycling. But it's also just got like I actually think some of the smaller tracks. This one has some much better smaller tracks on than the Old Tunes Volume 2, which we'll get to later. I think this is the second best of the unreleased sort of compilation album early work material. It's got some really good stuff on overall. So that can go B as well, I think. What else? Right, now we're going to do Old Tunes Volume 2. This one here, which was from roughly 1996. I do think this is the worst of the three. Still has some tracks on that, not bad. BMX track is a good one. You see, you even have tracks that come on later stuff as well. High scores, etc. BoC High, probably one of their better tracks, actually, even though it's an unreleased one, technically. So you do have some stuff on here. Some of this stuff, obviously, is just bleeding into what later becomes better work. It also does have a bunch of tracks that, to me, are just like some weird TV sample or just kind of whatever, or they're not really doing the style of music they did later. They're experimenting a lot more on this one. So this one's not as interesting to me. In fact, I've got to say, I do like BoC High, but maybe this one is the one album I'll put in C. Maybe I'll even put that in C. I feel like it might be C. I think that's fair. It is significantly worse than these two and has some overlap with one of them. Right, then we're going to have BoC Maxima, which is weird because, as I referenced earlier, it's not technically actually an album or a thing that they released. Look, it's listed as limited only releases. They only had 50 units of this they printed up in 1996 before they did their first album. So what I'm going to have to do here is go and show you it via this. There it is. There is overlap to other material, but there are also some banger things that you had to get elsewhere. So you have a bunch of the stuff like Wildlife Analysis, Everything You Do Is... But these are all things, Roy Gbave. These are all things from Music Has a Right to Children, but it was before Music Has a Right to Children. And interestingly, it mixes in some things from some of the EPs and some unreleased stuff. And some of the stuff from the old tunes, etc. But the way it does it is really good. Like, what I would compare this to is if you're a fan of the Smiths, you'll know that being a fan of the Smiths isn't just being a fan of the albums. It's also being a fan of the compilation albums, which sometimes have so much crossover with the albums. You could argue some of the compilation albums are better. I would say similar to this. I actually think this selection of tracks with a mixture of unreleased or older rework stuff and some stuff from the other albums, this is a contender up there with the first two albums for one of the best albums they've ever done. I think this is just really, really... Yes, there's overlap, but this was before. So I think I've got to put BoC Maxima actually in S. I think it's fucking mega. So few weak tracks, almost none, quite frankly. Yes, there's overlap, but this came out beforehand, and they're just fantastic tracks. I even think the selection fits together really well. It would be a different album, certainly, than Music Has a Right to Children, but I think it's fucking fantastic. And this was actually, if you don't know, what was played on what you can often find on websites as the Helter Skelter radio recording. You don't need that. You can just get the real recording of the proper tracks. That was just on a French radio station. And as you see here, a lot of this stuff got re-recorded and put out elsewhere. Apparently, this is a shorter version of the one on Twoism. But apparently, Twoism was then re-released. And then, as it says, there's 4 totally unique tracks to this album. I think it's fantastic, this one. Very good. Again, I'm putting it S tier. Right, 4 to go. This is the High Scores EP, which is their second EP from 1996, so before their first album. This is pretty strong, I've got to say. Pretty strong album. Pretty strong EP, sorry. By the way, I don't know why they've put that there, because actually this is the more famous sort of like these two girls on it. That's the more famous one that we all remember. There's this weird thing they put here for some reason. Right, first of all, even though, yes, it's also obviously on one of their albums, this actually might be my favourite Balls of Canada track. Everything You Do Is a Balloon is one of the most addictive tracks they've ever made. This is obviously before they had any albums out. It's really incredible. I also think June 9th is a catchy track. Turquoise Hexagon Son's obviously good. High Scores itself is a good one. It's not their best. It's not their best. And there is overlap with other stuff, but I tell you what, I still think it's an A. It's still really good material. As I said, their real, proper published material is all excellent for my money. Right, this here, just a Boards of Canada logo. I'm going to guess that's the Aquarius EP, which is technically... Oh, yeah, there we go. It's only 2 tracks, though. It's the track Aquarius, which obviously comes from Music Has a Right to Children. It's one of their best tracks. It's actually a track I'm sure plenty of you have heard of. It's the one where basically the person's going like, fucking, isn't it the one where the person's counting like 1, 2, just probably the most iconic Balls of Canada track. That is a mega track, I've got to say. And then Chinook was one which was off like BoC Maxima and some other things, but I mean, it's a pretty good track. It's certainly not one of their best, but it's a good track. The problem is there's only 2 tracks on this. I think even calling this an EP is a bit of a fucking reach. I mean, look, it barely reaches the 13 mark. It should be a single. This is a single, really. Let's be real. This is a single. But I'll tell you what, both tracks are really fucking good, though. Like, part of me thinks it should go B because how good the tracks are. But I guess one of the tracks is on their other album. In fact, both the tracks are. I'll put it C, I guess, in that sense, because it has only 2 tracks, and they're not the absolute best. I do like Aquarius. It is a really good track. But can it really be as good as like an entire album material, even if unreleased? Maybe not. Maybe it should be in C. Right, 2 to go. We've got Music as a Right to Children. I'm going to instantly put it in the S tier. It's their first album. It's a really fucking good album. It just tells, if you want to know what Boards of Canada are like, it's a perfect primer. It's got everything. It's got the vignettes. It's got the longer tracks. It's got the harsher electronic drum aspects. It's got the ambient elements. It's got this quiet drones. It's got cool samples. It's got the religious allusions. It's got really nice name style. They copied throughout most of their career. Always get the bonus tracks, by the way. Happy Cycling is the key one to get here. It's a mega track. It's really catchy. You don't have to worry about these bonus ones here, because these 2 are going to be on the Peel session, which we're about to do now. And if you're a collectivist, whatever, a collector, you're going to get that anyway, aren't you? But it's just Japan always gets extra shit to encourage them to buy things there instead of importing. So they essentially got like some of the tracks from the Peel session, but not XYZ, as just freebies on their album, because that's just the way things go out there, I guess. Easily an S tier for me. The last one is the Peel session, which, if you don't know, John Peel was a radio DJ who famously tried to like find a lot of new music acts and then showcase them on his show. And actually, he very early on did showcase Boards of Canada. And crucially, if we go down to here, really? Peel session can't actually be... There's no Peel session at all here. Wait there a second. Really? Oh no, there we go. It is only 4 tracks, technically, because it had these 3. Now, here's the thing. Aquarius and Olsen are 2 different versions, though, of the tracks that are actually on the album. Like, from what I remember, I think this Aquarius one's like a little bit more funky, and the Olsen one is, I think, just longer, actually. Let's just check that a second. So if we go to here... I think they just extended it. Olsen was 131 there. And what was it here? It's 231, yes. This is a better version of Olsen, which, by the way, is also a really addictive, awesome sort of droning track they have. Really, really great one. So the key thing for me with this is it's 4 tracks. Aquarius is good anyway, but you already have it in the album. Olsen is a better version. Happy Cycling was a bonus track to their other album anyway, and so technically not released before now, and it's just one of their better tracks in this era. And then XYZ, which on this one was a radio release, is a fucking banger, one-off, never to be released track at the time. It was eventually released on like a Warp, like, I don't know, 20th, 30th anniversary thing, actually a few years ago, as like a proper studio release. So you can go and check that out. I think it was called like WXAXRXP sessions. And that was one of the ones released there as like a full one, not just the radio edit. So I've got to say, this is pretty fucking strong for an EP, actually. Even though some of this is played live on the radio, but still, it wasn't played live in the sense of the instruments. They'd already recorded it and they just sent him a cassette. He fucking played it, didn't he? So I've got to say, it's got to be at least B. There is some overlap. There's not that many tracks. I can't fully give it like a full... Like, this is on the borderline to becoming A, like some of the EPs, but it's more like the unreleased stuff, and it's kind of like for collectors. If you're not a huge fan of this group yet, you just start with S, then go through A, then go through B. Just go like that, and you'll be in the right order. And now let's actually change up the order of them, though. I've just realised that. By the way, there's also some material I didn't put on it. Like I said, there's a load of remixes. Like, by the way, if you love this track, I do, Roigbiv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, just the rainbow, basically. They have an amazing version of that they made for like a fan or something, for his homework or something. Look it up. It's called like the Alpha Quest mix. And it's just a better version of that track with like a really cool sort of like breakdown 2/3 of the way through and a different sample on. It's fucking baller. They also did like a recent thing where it was like the Societas mixtape, where like they took a bunch of like almost tracks from other artists and blended it sometimes with their own tracks and made like a weird mixtape. That was one of their most recent releases. Had some mashups in there. Yeah, they're just a really interesting set of people. Now let's do the order though. Because again, I think I would put Music as a Right to Children first. But I might even put BoC Maxima third, because I am a big fan of their early period. Then in terms of the EPs, I think I've actually already got this right, because I would probably go... No, I think I would maybe go Trans-Canada Highway first. Then I'll go In a Beautiful Place Out in the Country. Then I'll go Twoism. Then I'll go High Scores. I think I already said earlier on, this is the best of them, is Peel. better than this, though? It could be. I'll say it is, actually, even though it's less tracks. And then down here, that probably is better. This is probably their worst piece of material, to be fair. I think that's a pretty good... Again, there's no D. There's nothing even vaguely average to trash here. But it depends how much you get into the group. I mean, my ear's completely tuned into them. I'll buy the ticket and take the ride anytime with this group. One of the best to ever do it. Without the noble families of the Italian city-states, you may never have heard of or been able to appreciate the art of some of the greatest Renaissance artists of all time. And similarly, my content on this channel, which I consider art, is kindly supported by Abradiation and the rest of my Patreon supporters. Do you want to choose one of the topics that I might focus on next in a video? Maybe you want to ask me a question that I'll answer in a video AMA. Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are for Thor Inquiry. Maybe you want to take part in one of those private, never to be released, recorded for your benefit discussions with me one-on-one, where you can talk about almost any topic, assuming it's appropriate. Well, if any of those perks or others tickle your fancy, heed this call to action and join Thorin's side today at the Patreon link in the description box below.